Hello and welcome to BBB's Smart Consumer program. Our goal is to teach you about facilities, tools, and resources for consumers and families to protect them from con artists losing money and to make the most of services they might not even be aware of. In this episode, we're going to touch upon something that isn't really talked about much or enough, and it's elder abuse. Well, that's changing, and here in Connecticut we have the Coalition for Elder Justice, partnering to protect human rights and prevent abuse. Each year, hundreds of thousands of older persons are abused and neglected and exploited, and many victims are older people who are vulnerable and frail and cannot help themselves, and they depend on others to meet their most basic needs. Abusers of older adults are both women and men, and they may be family members, friends, or trusted others. In general, elder abuse is a term referring to any knowing, intentional, or negligent act by a caregiver or any other person that causes harm or a serious risk of harm to a vulnerable adult. Well, legislatures in all 50 states have passed some form of elder abuse prevention laws, and the addition of these terms may vary considerably from one state to another. Well, Better Business Bureau is serving on Connecticut's Coalition for Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and among the other members is the Jewish Senior Citizens, and joining us right now from JSS is Erin Burke, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hi.
So before we start, what is Jewish Senior Services? I've been having trouble with that, by the way, since we started.
It's okay.
What do you folks do?
Jewish Senior Services is a nonprofit organization. We're actually the first skilled nursing facility in the state of Connecticut to provide a home model of care to our residents. But in addition to skilled nursing, we provide a number of other aging services, including assisted living, rehab, rehabilitation, therapy, a number of community services, including our Institute on Aging, which encompasses our Senior Choice at Home, Home Together, our Center for Elder Abuse Prevention, and clinic.
Now, your Center on Elder Abuse Prevention, that's part of what we're talking about. That is a first line for identifying elder abuse?
Yes. Including our protective services for the elderly, which is through the State Department of Social Services. But yes, our Center for Elder Abuse Prevention is a go-to for individuals who may not be aware of protective services for the elderly. And we also service all of Fairfield County, but have been able to make a number of referrals across the state.
So this really makes your organization a perfect fit for the Coalition for Elder Justice.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Coalition, for example.
Okay.
Now, we have infrastructures that are put into place for spousal abuse, for child abuse, but we've been a little bit far behind on the elderly, haven't we?
We have. I always refer to what other elder abuse specialists say, and making the point that elder abuse is where domestic violence and child abuse was 25, 30 years ago. And I really do agree, having spent a majority of my academics and professional career in aging as well as in elder abuse, and sort of see a lack of awareness when it comes to elder abuse. But I think one of the biggest differences is recognizing that elder abuse is a much more isolated issue. We're working with very vulnerable older adults who are often frail and sometimes too ashamed or embarrassed to speak up, or in some cases have certain conditions, health conditions such as dementia or Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia, and don't know how to respond or to report what is going on.
And aside from the reluctance, it might be due to shame. In some cases, it also could be fear is one of the reasons.
Certainly, yes.
That is because?
Fear due to fear of retaliation from an individual who may be assisting them in some way. Fear of bringing shame upon the family. And upon themselves.
Now, this can happen with virtually any other member of the family, but sometimes we see this through a financial lens, don't we?
We do. And financial abuse of the elderly is an incredibly dynamic aspect of elder abuse. And I think what we see with financial abuse cases is it's sometimes an adult child who's experiencing their own difficulties in their life and are now seeking some sort of assistance from their parent. Maybe they've lost a job, they're experiencing some form of substance abuse, drug abuse, and often our elderly have a much more stable flow of income. It may not be a sufficient amount of income, but still it's stable through Social Security, pension, and it's a reliable resource for that individual. And you know, we've also seen cases where there's very intentional acts of financial exploitation, but in other cases it wasn't necessarily their intent, but it sort of led to a moment of convenience to the point where they were able to exploit an older adult.
So when we're talking about any degree of, shall we say, inability to know what's going on, whether it's dementia or whatever, that makes the crimes easier to commit. For example, if they've got power of attorney over a parent or a relative, that's one of the places we would see a problem?
That's one of the places, and we often refer to a power of attorney as a license to steal. There are a number of ramifications of a power of attorney, and if it's not monitored in some way, an individual who does have an intention to exploit an older adult for any kind of financial gain can really take advantage through a power of attorney. But a lot of efforts have been made through Uniform Power of Attorney Act as well.
I'm not asking for an exact number, but when you see someone who's the victim of abuse, rough percentage of how many are aware that something's going on, whether it's financially or neglect, versus the ones who are not aware?
Oh gosh, I don't believe that there is a very clear statistic on that exactly. Often when we receive calls at our center for elder abuse prevention, it's usually at a moment where there's no more funds left in the individual's bank account. And it's often because they've been completely removed from their ability to monitor their own finances. But I imagine it's a very high percentage of individuals who just aren't initially aware.
They have no idea.
They have no idea.
Because they've put their trust in a family member. So if we look at the Coalition for Elder Justice in Connecticut, how does it bring all of this together? How does it bring together the first line people and everybody else who follows in the chain?
Okay, well, the coalition, which was founded by the State Department on Aging in 2013, really had the mission to prevent elder abuse and to protect the rights, the security, the independence and well-being of older adults through collaborative efforts of both public and private entities, including our organization, which is a nonprofit private organization. So number of aging services, numerous state departments, including not only the Department on Aging, but the Department of Social Services, the Connecticut Bankers Association, Better Business Bureau, Credit Union League of Connecticut, the Ombudsman, State Ombudsman Program, a number of law enforcement, Office of the Probate. So they all work collaboratively and seek developing more cohesive means in preventing elder abuse.
That's a long list of
Yes.
resources that are available.
There are more too.
But, and we don't have the time for that. But when we're looking at these types of services, it's very easy to say, well, we should have known about this a long time ago, but we have different departments doing different things, and the coalition's aim is really to bring them under an umbrella where they can act in concert.
Yes.
To prevent problems, to stop problems. What are some of the ways that the coalition actually educates people about these things?
Well, we've hosted a number of annual conferences for professionals working within all of these public and private entities. We've also organized a number of action teams. There's a banking action team, law enforcement action team, our Fraud Watch action team, which is led by the Connecticut AARP, and a number of individuals, while they may not be part of a financial institution, such as our aging service, Jewish Senior Services, we each can contribute in some way to each action team if we're interested. And as an action team, we come up with a number of initiatives that we can work on as a team to address specific aspects of elder abuse, whether it's financial abuse, whether it's neglect, whether it's domestic violence, a number of things.
One of the reasons Better Business Bureau was invited to the table to join the coordinating council is because financial abuse is abuse. Now we're talking about perhaps familial abuse, that sort of thing. Sometimes even a professional will do that. But there's also the abuse that is, shall we say, scams that target seniors. Has the advancement of technology, from your standpoint, made the elderly more vulnerable, or are they starting to catch on through education that they have to be careful at the front door, on the telephone, on the computer?
I certainly do think that advancements of technology have contributed to the vulnerability of older adults, especially when it comes to financial exploitation. I've seen a number of cases just at our Center for Elder Abuse Prevention at Jewish Senior Services where an adult child, or I'll use an adult child for example, is able to create an online banking account. And as we know, I know at least my grandmother always went to the bank and always had a very personal moment with the bank teller when making a transaction, a withdrawal, a deposit. And she's often not relying on the computer or on any kind of online banking services to carry out her finances. So in many ways, we find these perpetrators who sort of slip under these older adults' radar through means of technology.
We found out some interesting things at Better Business Bureau that speak to that, and that actually groups 65 and older are the least, they're the most likely to not trust scammers. And most of us thought, well, folks who are college educated between 25 and 35 will probably be the least savviest. So we were very surprised to find out that that group, college educated up to the age of 35, were the ones who not only, they had this view that we all have at some point, it'll happen to someone else, but not to me. And their dollar losses were the highest because they would get involved in things like investments.
Right.
But what we do see that's very, very encouraging is that we have players like Western Union, MoneyGram, who are actually will watch folks, not just the elderly, but as an example, if they're going to pay for something by wire transfer, which is what we see a lot. If somebody calls on the phone, it might be an imposter. It might be someone who's threatening them, threatening to turn off their electricity. So if somebody is sending money through what we'll call an untraceable method, those companies that do the direct wiring are actually asking, do you know the person that this money is being sent to?
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing.
It is a wonderful thing.
Is the goal achievable? And let me back up a step. We've learned a tremendous amount sitting at that council table. And I was surprised when a frontline emergency nurse came in and she told us that she was training us the difference between how to identify signs of abuse and how to identify signs of accidental bruising, those types of things. You would think by now that would be standard, everyone would know that type of thing. Apparently not.
So your question is?
So my question is, does it seem like we've still got a long way to go in terms of tying the pieces together with all the different people who could help out prevent abuse?
Right, and whether or not that goal is achievable. I think personally, and as a professional, it seems like a very simple question, but a very difficult one to answer. And I think because of the devastating effects of all forms of violence on their victims, we tend to focus a lot on response and services. And really, what I've seen in evolution as well within our coalition, within our center, is prevention and targeting really the root cause of these issues. Whether it's emphasizing bank tellers to pay more attention to an older adult who's a regular customer and looking back at their transaction history to make sure that there's nothing unusual or making any kind of unusual withdrawals. For example, whether it's distinguishing between an accidental bruise or an intentional bruise, or being able to better assist caregivers in the task that they're about to embark on in caring for an aging older adult. And another project that we've embarked on alongside, in collaboration with the Yale School of Public Health, is working with law enforcement to better detect signs of elder abuse and indicators of elder abuse when they're responding to a call that may involve an older adult. So those are just some examples, but it's hard to say whether or not we can really prevent it entirely. I would love to.
But education's the key.
But
here.
education is the key.
Now, would Jewish Senior Services feed information in about suspected abuse to a member of the coalition? And how would you go about that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, when you see signs of obvious abuse or strongly suspected, yes, would you be the folks who might send this information into the coalition, and how would you decide who that would go to?
Well, you mean we acting as a liaison?
As a liaison or as a first responder saying, something's not right here.
Something's not right. I would really encourage individuals, while they're certainly encouraged to contact our center so that we may act as a liaison. People should be encouraged to make a report to Protective Services for the Elderly through the Department of Social Services.
What are some of the things that the coalition would like the viewers at home to be watching for who might think everything is fine, and it very well may be? What are the things we should be looking for? I know there's the physical side, there's the behavioral side, as well as the neglect side.
Very true. There is a list of risk factors for elder abuse. I think the most salient risk factors that we always try to point out to individuals to really stay aware of is just the age and the frailty and of an older adult as they age. And also isolation is another huge risk factor. Staying more aware of either a neighbor or a grandparent or a parent, and in some cases, well, actually not in some cases, but onset of dementia and other forms of dementia such as Alzheimer's. Those are really all huge risk factors for elder abuse. And also another one is cohabitation with a perpetrator, since a majority of elder abuse cases occur within the domestic setting. They're often cohabitating with a perpetrator.
So a family member should not be reluctant to check receipts, checkbooks, statements, bank and otherwise?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's probably even tougher to try and bring that up. Do you do that with the person you suspect is committing the abuse, or do you go outside?
Sorry, what do you...
Well, in other words, if you suspect there's some abuse going on in the house with a caretaker, do you confront them, or do you take it somewhere else because you're just not sure?
Right. That's when we start getting to some really sticky territory, because we never want to make any blatant accusations unless we know for sure that the individual who is assisting the older adult is in fact the perpetrator. I think definitely being able to speak with the older adult on their own, of course, if they have capacity to be able to make those decisions and carry out that conversation. I think making sure that they're aware of the situation they're in, understanding what signs are being recognized, and providing them with as many resources. I think I would never hold a conversation with an older adult if I suspected that the individual that they're with is a perpetrator.
And just briefly, it's very tough to do so because you're suspecting it and it's easy to cover up.
Right, and going back to fear of retaliation, if that accusation is made, and while it might be true, but we don't have that sound evidence, it could be a more dangerous situation for the older adult.
Great. I'd like to thank you very much, Erin Burke from Jewish Senior Services.
Thank you.
We appreciate it, and we're talking about the Connecticut Coalition for Elder Justice, and the pieces should all be together very soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for this episode of BBB's Smart Consumer, to help you and your family protect yourselves from criminal activity and fraud. The Coalition's website is still under construction, but you can find links to it on Better Business Bureau's and Jewish Senior Services website as well. And we urge you to discuss what you've learned today during the show with families and members of the family, neighbors, colleagues, other friends, because that's really the only way that we can get to help victims to understand what constitutes abuse and what to do about it. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest, Erin Burke from Jewish Senior Services. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you soon.